and everything you're saying is going to be accurate? And do you affirm or swear to that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Would we like to start with the letters first, or with just open?
Generally, what makes sense is to go ahead and acknowledge all three letters. You indicate whether they're in favor or opposed to, and then once you get into your review and your discussion of the matter, you may want to bring in something that someone referred to in one of those letters.
Okay. So it looks like we have three letters that have been submitted to us. One from Carrie Campbell in support of Mr. Henderson. One from from Dr. Pollack. It looks like that would be on the negative side, and then the other is from Mitzi Miller, also on the nay side. We'll admit those into record. Next step would be to open the hearing.
So if you want to have Denise just summarize and
Yeah.
then perhaps ask questions of her before you hear from her.
Before we hear from them, okay?
All right, I'll be
Denise,
happy to do
just
that.
give us a
Yeah,
roundup
so
view.
I've provided a very detailed report as a result of the variance application with exhibits. There is a lot more information in it, mostly in response to some of the things that were brought up in the variance application itself. You may note that the original variance application was for a relocation of the shed. Mr. Henderson then, via email, made a request that he was actually wanting the variance for leaving the structure where it is. So I think it's important to note, even though there is all of those other exhibits in the packet, that what we are here tonight for is specific to the setback and the height of the structure. If you have any questions for me, feel free.
Guys, any questions?
Not yet.
There's plenty of questions that I have that we could go over through this. So we're going to only specifically talk about height and the setback, the side setback at this point in time, correct?
That's my understanding.
So as far as any past, if there's what's in the past or what's going on and history of, should we incorporate that? Can I incorporate that now? Have there been other issues that have come up, Denise, that you've seen through this? Is that of any importance for us to bring up at this point, at this stage of the game? Or should we just stick with the setback and the height?
The matter before the BZA is the issue of the applicant's request for a variance on setback and height. To the extent that history is relevant to the discussion, which will be a determination for this body to make, it will come up. But you won't know that until
Okay.
the discussion.
With the height requirement, what had, Denise, just go, help us to know what were the problems that occurred, or what were the height restrictions that you saw, and also with the setback, what has transpired and has changed?
Well, when I took a photograph on December 4th, the height would have still been 17 feet. There was a little structure at the top that Mr. Henderson indicated made the height 17 feet. Without that structure, he had indicated that it was 12 feet, 10 inches. The original permit was for an 11 by 18 structure. It showed a 7-foot setback. That would have allowed, a roof overhang eve of, 1 to 2 feet. However, as you can see from the exhibits, the way the structure was built, it had a 0 setback.
So the variance request as it relates to setback is what?
Well, I mean, it was 0 when we brought this up with Mr. Henderson. He has since indicated, which is in the report, that he did cut back 2 feet of it. So we're still talking about a setback of 3 feet.
So he's seeking a variance of 2 feet?
3 feet.
3 feet, a total variance of 3 feet from the 5-foot setback requirement.
And then a variance of 17 feet for the structure that, because the structure's on top, which the height for that is 12 feet, so 5 feet.
So a 5-foot height variance and a 3-foot setback variance.
Correct.
Is
Just
it
a-
correction that top part's been cut off?
You have to come up, and you'll,
Wait, yeah. If we, if, when these modifications were made, then a permit should have been, then we should have got a permit, or did we get a permit? If there's any kind of modification, is that required for him to?
Yeah,
meet
it was, at the time that Mr. Henderson was presenting an idea to put a fence down a shared driveway and have a parking pad in front of his property. And when I saw the application, I just noticed that he had a height of the structure as 21 feet. I wasn't really evaluating that, but I happened to indicate to him that the tallest an accessory structure can be is 18 feet. I knew he already had a permit for the structure, and the way the application looked, it looked like it was, the plan was at some point maybe to move it, but that's not what we were talking about. So I didn't take it any further than that. I just indicated that the height for any accessory structure maximum is 18 feet. He did come back and say it was 17 feet, and I let it go at that point. I wasn't looking at it for the type of roof that it was. We were actually talking about something else. This original permit was issued in 2013. I assumed that was built shortly thereafter.
It was built within the 2 years, or?
No, I thought that,
Okay.
but when some other issues came up over our right-of-way and our property, and we started looking at aerial shots from Greene County, it was clear that it was, the pad was put in 2013, but there hadn't been any construction that had started till at least 2015. And then that was phased in for a couple more years, and sometime in 2017, it must have been completed, I'm guessing, because it was, when it first came to my attention with neighbor complaints was in December of 2017, after a wind event. Had a couple neighbors call because they were concerned. They were hearing flapping noises and,
I need to
And
interject
that-
for a second. I think that I either misunderstood your question, Dino, on relevance and past history, and I think that we need to kind of do a reset. There is history here that's relevant to the hearing, in the sense of how we got here.
Okay.
So my understanding is that there is an existing structure on the property, that structure is non-conforming, that it is in violation of both the height and the rear setback.
in side yard.
Side yard setback. And that in order to attempt to make that structure compliant, Mr. Henderson has submitted a variance application for both the side yard setback and the height setback. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Correct,
And so that's where we are right now.
right.
Okay.
Okay. And so I think if there's any other questions that any member of the BZA has of staff,
I have a quick one. Is the side setback due to overhang of the roof or the walls of the building? If you know what I
The
mean?
wall, at the footprint, he's in compliance.
Okay.
That's
But
where it flows out.
It flows open. At the roof edge, he is not in compliance.
How far is he out of compliance?
3 feet,
Okay, that's okay.
yeah. Your side yard setback is 5. And
Yeah,
his-
and so it hangs over,
3
the
feet.
wall's okay, it hangs over 3 feet.
Yes.
3 feet into the
I mean,
5 feet.
Yeah.
That's what I understood.
He has a 2-foot gap from his property line,
To the edge of the roof,
from the edge of the roof to
and
the
5
property
feet to
line.
the building.
At
on the
least,
side. Okay.
probably even more, because the original parking pad was 7 feet.
Okay.
and so, and Denise, you obviously prepared a staff report. Can you just summarize the contents of what's in the staff report and then if each member of the BZA can acknowledge that they've reviewed that report and that it's part of the record.
Yeah, I mean, I just historically went back through, putting in the different, the exhibits from the original permit, which was issued for an 11 by 18 shed, minimum 10 feet from rear and 5 feet from side, and that was in 2013. I provided both the old zoning code and the new zoning code, because the new zoning code went into effect in September. It was voted in. It would have been enacted in October of 2013, and this permit was issued in August. So Mr. Henderson is saying he's grandfathered in. So I did provide both the old zoning code and the new zoning code, and although I have some questions about that because the permit had actually expired because he had not completed it within 2 years. So he really would have needed to come back and get a new permit to finish the construction. So it's debatable as to whether he's under the 2013 or the old or the new.
Because the
feel-
2-year period had expired.
Yeah, I feel that the old is pretty much
What's
irrelevant.
staff's position on that?
It's irrelevant now. He's under the 2013. Now, setbacks, it didn't matter. I mean, the setback prior was roof edge. The setback in the new code is building volume, which takes in the roof edge, so they're kind of saying the exact same thing. And that's kind of where we're at.
Any other questions?
Yes, since this was going on, and you changed the code was changed, or a new code was adopted, does the city, or I'm sorry, does the village have any, or should the village inform anybody who had an open permit? Or was there any action taken by the city or the zoning code to say, hey, the new permit's in? Or you just put the owner on the onus on the home builder or the shed builder to know that took place? If you had open permits that weren't closed?
Typically, once we issue the permit, now we ask people to let us know when they've completed it. I don't know what the process was prior,
Oh, okay.
but that was issued over 2 years before
Yeah.
I even started
Oh,
here.
okay.
So, I mean, I was under the assumption that it was already built.
Understand.
When I got the first complaint in 2017, yes.
There's typically nothing, well, certainly in the current code, there's nothing that requires the village to inform someone on the
Okay.
expiration of the permit that they've requested.
That was my question, basically. Thank you.
I think that was my question earlier, is that if the permit expired in 2015, then he would be under the new, he would have been under the new permit anyways. He would have needed to,
He would have needed to reapply, which would
reapply.
have made him applicable to whatever the new code.
And
would have been.
grandfathering would not come into play because you've expired. If you didn't build within that 2-year period, then you have to reapply and you're gonna be under the new code. So grandfathering would not apply here because he didn't complete the project in the 2-year period.
Under this fact pattern. However, the fact pattern could be a little different, again, what we don't have here, but if somebody asked to renew the permit in a timely way,
Right.
then one would make the case that that existing code that the permit was issued under would be the applicable code.
And do we know that it was renewed or not?
No.
It was not, or we don't know?
No, I have nothing that says it was renewed.
Okay.
No. I only have the original
Okay.
permit.
Okay.
And I think I have information in here where I did, on a couple of occasions, when he was going to want to relocate it, I attached the permit and told him in the email that he needed to submit a new permit.
And that's what I was reading here, under the new code, anything that you're gonna, any modification to the building, moving the building, modifying the building, needs to be permitted.
Relocating it,
Anything.
adding solar panels, you need to come back.
Adding, cutting, doing, anything you're gonna do that would need a permit.
Yeah.
And was there a permit for this at this point in time? Or has it been completed, turned in, approved?
He's not received an approved permit, no.
Okay.
There seems to be a discrepancy in, when I read through this, how high is the building? I read 5 different numbers. I'm exaggerating, it may not have been 5, it was a bunch. I saw 17, I saw 13, I saw 21, I can't.
And
how-
12 to 10, yep.
Yeah, does anybody know, has anybody gone out and measured the height of the building? Please.
The building is now 12 foot 10 inches.
Can you, okay, when I drove by it, can you tell me, and we have pictures, what is 12 feet high? You had that, you had the thing, when I drove by it, let it be a week ago, you had like that
Yeah.
piping on top, and that had.
That was a reflector panel for the solar panels, but that is no longer there.
That's no longer there, okay. So the top of the roof, so that's gone. So the-
Settings is done right here.
Okay, so,
You wanna hold on a
That's
second?
all I'm saying.
We're getting ahead of
If those
ourselves.
are questions that you have for the applicant, let's
Let's
do
wait.
that
Oh, okay,
in a
I'm sorry.
formalized process. You've articulated a question that you have,
We'll get to it
and
when it
then
comes
you
up.
can get
Oh,
to
okay,
that.
I'm sorry.
but just to clarify, the variance request is for a variance of 5 feet in height. Is that correct? What you have before you, request a variance of 5 feet in height.
That's what, the information that I had, yes. And when I prepared the report on, and took the photo December 4th, because the packet had to be ready by Thursday, it was, the height was 17 feet, according to Mr. Henderson.
Okay.
Yes, and the height should be 12 feet.
Not yet. No, let's just go through the procedure. When you get, you'll have ample opportunity to come up and speak when we go through everything. Any other questions, guys?
I'm going through my notes.
Okay.
I didn't completely, I'd like the variance, the rear variance. Can you
There's-
explain?
There was nothing, he's compliant with the rear
Oh,
yard
okay,
setback.
okay, the rear setback,
Yes.
okay.
When the concrete was poured for the pad, it was 7 feet from the side.
Okay.
And so it was far enough away from the rear. So
Okay,
that's
thank you.
not in question.
I have no other questions this time, so.
Scott,
No,
with that being said, you want to open,
If the panel doesn't have any more questions of staff.
at this point in time, we'll just wait and wait questions will fire up from us. We can have an open hearing,
Open the hearing, yeah.
open the hearing. You have 3 minutes to speak. Are we
Well,
doing that, or how are we going to do?
You might want to start with the petitioner, so Mr. Henderson, and he's allotted a little more time because you may want to back and forth
Right.
some questions with him.
Before we
You may
open
want
up
to
to.
open with him before you open the public.
Okay, great. Mr. Henderson, the floor is yours.
And if you
Well-
could just, and this is for everyone, when you come up, if you can identify yourself, please, for the record.
My name is Brett Henderson. Thanks for hosting this meeting to talk about my structure. This all started when my wife and I had partnered with Home Inc. to build our house. We were supposed to have a garage on site, and that was the agreement when we purchased the home and agreed to build the home. And due to the village's right-of-way, we had to set the home back further than expected, which then encroached on the distance between the garage, so we had to tear down that garage that was existing, that we had agreed to buy. So Home Inc. had agreed to pour a pad for me to put up a replacement storage shed. So that's where this all started, why the pad was poured when we constructed the house. It was then left to me, and my understanding was that we had the approval because that was how we purchased the house, this was all part of the planning process. So it was up to me to then erect the structure on what was just 2 square feet under 200 square feet to avoid, the process of needing to get a structural permit from the county. So then I took it as a design challenge. I like to build. I'm an artist. I like to sculpt. I like to, look at my limitations and figure out how to make the most functional space possible within a given footprint. So that's what I started out with. All the materials to make the shed have been upcycled. I hauled the oak beams from a barn structure from the 1800s. I upcycled those to make the walls. I put up upcycled utility poles around the perimeter so that I could erect this shed by myself, which was also an economic design challenge to do this as affordably as possible and also make a structure that a single person could put up by themselves, and also create the biggest canopy as possible for solar panels to produce, the energy for the home. So these were all of my, what I thought were very aligned issues that I thought the village cared about. My goal was to create a one-of-a-kind structure, which is what it ended up being. And, it took me 2 to 3 years to put it up. I didn't realize when I committed to this that there was a time limit. My creative process comes and goes. I'm busy at sometimes. I've got time. I wait on materials because I work with upcycled materials. Sometimes, it takes me a while to find the right materials. The wall panels are actually upcycled 1 5/8" plywood that were used to store engine parts on. I hauled those from my parents' house. My dad bought those at an auction. And then I used actually the cable to erect the walls. I had the utility poles with aircraft cable that I'd upcycled from the Antioch solar array, which I developed and built. And there was a pile of aircraft cable left over from that installation that I took as a design challenge to figure out how I could make something with this waste. So all this energy and upcycling went into this construction process. The actual walls, I was able to connect with those aircraft cables. All this wrecked by myself, and then gravity actually held them in place. I notched out the oak beams along the sides so that they fit the concrete pad, so that all of this in the weight of the 1 5/8" panels with the oak beams, it was gravity ballasted, so it wasn't going anywhere. And that was my intention, that it would be there for a very long time to support eventually solar panels that would go on top, which have a lifespan of 30 years. Another goal and reason for the angled walls were to reflect light back up, which I put a transparent roof on so that then I could put bifacial solar panels which harvest light on the front and back side of the panel. I also used a double-walled insulated greenhouse fluted polycarbonate. That was the one material that I bought brand new. Spent $2,000 on these because eventually the plan was to pump water through those channels in the transparent roof to actually take the heat off of the solar panels, because solar panels perform better when they're cooler. So I was transferring the heat off of the panels to then transfer for my hot water system. So all these were design considerations. The angled walls actually reflect light back up onto the back side of the panels for greater efficiency, and that would allow you to take the tax credit. This was all R&D for a future product, so that you could take the tax credit on the actual cost of the structure, the cost of the walls, because they're increasing the performance of the solar panels. And this was all to problem solve, to bring down the cost of solar. And also the reason I put it up so high was to get out of the shade of the house in front. And then the 17-foot portion was a reflector panel, and the reflectors I bent, myself. I got from a printing company. They're upcycled printing plates that they used to print on, and that was to reflect light back down onto the solar panels. I've since cut that portion of the structure off so that I could be as close to compliance as possible. I did write Ms. Swinger an email saying that I was willing to compromise and cut the height down to 12 foot 10 inches, and I requested that as a compromise. I thought the closer I could get. I also cut off the edges, so I felt, that I think I'm, 2.5 feet back from the property line now with my upper part of my roof. I guess that's where I'm at now. I mean, it took me, it's still not finished. In the process, it became a safety concern that I had to address, so I went out and paid $500 to a structural engineer to come in and evaluate what I built. He didn't think it was a safety issue, but he said to actually be in code compliance, you need to add, it was like 5 boards, out of the entire structure that I, came up with on my own. But I didn't add those boards because I kept getting attacks from, different angles from, all over my yard for having to change things that I had already done. So I waited to add those boards, and it's probably a good thing that I did, because now there's the possibility that I'm going to have to take it down, and I didn't want to have to continue to, add more and have to take away. So that's where I'm at. I did put up some solar panels that I had upcycled from a customer whose system got hit by lightning. I didn't install that system, but they wanted me to take those panels away. I saw that as another design challenge, because in 25 years, the planet's going to have 75 million tons of solar panel waste, from these panels that we have to figure out something to do with. So I started to figure out how to make fencing out of these panels, figure out new racking systems for the panels. I did put the panels up on my roof just to, see how they fit and get some pictures. The end goal is to put bifacial panels up there, as the original design was intended for, so that the light passes through the panel and then reflects back up, and you get another 15% efficiency. So that's the structure. It currently serves as the warehouse for my solar business, which employs 5 local young men in this town, and they come to my house every morning and get materials out of that shed, and that's our storage facility for installing 30 solar projects in Greene County. All of this I felt were in alignment with the village values, so it's I'm a little shocked that my structure, with all my intentions, I thought it would be appreciated in the village. I think when I first built the Homemaker house, there were some comments that this house doesn't look like a Yellow Springs house, because it was just so bland and unoriginal. And so one of my design challenges and just the way I live my life is to be original. And I felt like I was achieving that while achieving many, many other positives with the structure. And it was something that I wanted to, it's a modular unit as well, so you can flip it around, and then you can have, a full one, or you can do them side by side and create a whole farm of these for affordable housing units that are also dual purpose as energy farms. So that's where I'm at. Any questions?
I'm sure we all do have a few questions. So you, at this point in time, you're using the shed what is exactly the shed being used for? You said it's warehousing, it's warehousing?
It's storage, it's storage, it's, we have a lot of materials for installing solar panels throughout the county.
And you got guys working there, or you got employees, you said?
They just come pick up materials there. Yeah.
Right.
So,
And so basically you're running your business, the business, what is the name of the business?
Yellow Springs Solar.
Okay, and so your business is based on, that's the address of the business, or that's where you're running?
Sure, it's
Okay.
my home business.
Yep,
yeah.
okay, yeah, great, okay. You also said you did put up solar panels. They were working, or you were just
No,
doing it
they're
for?
not
just-
functional.
You were just putting them up?
They're just
How long were they
waste
up?
right now.
But they were up for, what, how long?
Probably
were
been
they?
up a month, but
Okay.
then I got a letter that they needed to be taken down, so I took them down.
Okay, but they were not functional, they were just,
Not functional at all. No, they're broken. They're waste.
How
I
big-
tried to make a fence out of them, and I was told that I was littering in my own yard, and I was charged with a third-degree misdemeanor because I had solar panels in my front yard that I made a fence out of.
how big are the solar panels, the width of the solar panels? What's the width of?
About 1.5 inches. The thickness. of
Yeah, the
solar
thickness,
panel.
yeah, okay.
If I can make a comment, it was in December of 2017 when you said that you would get a structural engineer to let the village know the safety of that structure after that wind event.
Okay.
I did not get that letter until July 12th of 2018.
Okay.
It was at that time I asked you to provide a permit with that you've done this and it's been modified and your structural engineer has indicated that it is safe. Now, I don't think you did that. You indicated at one point that you didn't want to do it until you got approval of a fence permit for your shared driveway. And I think it was communicated at that time that we can't make one contingent on the other. I mean, it was a safety issue. You acknowledged that you were out there during that high wind event and trying to,
Oh, with the high wind event, I didn't even have the roof really secured at that time. I had to go out there in the middle of the winter because I hadn't even secured those panels. And once I saw that, I secured them in a way that it's never been an issue since. But I was still a work in progress. It's actually still a work in progress. I mean, that's just the way I build, and so it's a little inconvenient to have to tell you what I'm gonna do when I don't even know what I'm gonna do yet, because that's just the creative process. And it's like, obviously, that doesn't, fit with, zoning requirements. So,
And it is your intention to put solar panels up on there?
yes.
So then that
And
means,
that's what the
that means
building-
Greene County's gonna come in then and inspect.
Yeah, and I would have to have, the structural engineer that certified my structure, all I had to add again was 5 boards. I mean, it's not that he still thought it was unsafe. It's obviously
I know.
stood the test of time, but to put solar panels on it, which was an additional 3 pounds a square foot, he said you should add,
Right.
these additional supports. And that's to be to code, so that then I can go to Greene County.
Right, because Greene County's gonna have to inspect,
And
right?
he's the same structural engineer that I have used on 50 different solar projects, who verifies structural engineering. And it's interesting because I've been probably in 10 different houses where he's looked up in the attic and they're not to code. So is this like a can of worms that needs to be open, where we go into every house and be like, this needs to be retrofitted? It would, that would be a pretty big issue for many people that I know about personally.
So, a question for you on your business then. If I'm gonna put solar panels on my house, and I go through your business, what do I have to do? I have to get permitted, or do you get the permits? Do I go to
We get
village
the
to get
permits we do everything A to Z. I mean,
Okay,
we
you
bring
can-
our structural engineer in to look at your roof. He verifies that it's gonna be able to support not only the snow load, but also the extra weight of the solar panels.
Okay, so I would have to do that. So, and the reason I'm asking that is that when you put the solar panels up on your shed, did you get a permit, or did you
I
go?
already had his structural engineering.
But did you get a permit through the village to go through and say, I'm gonna permit through the village now?
Well,
just-
I mean, that would be the same as me just throwing pieces of wood up there. These aren't functional solar panels. They're just material that, it's like, they're not, it's
Yeah,
not like
functional.
required to. The only reason that they require the building permit for solar panels is because it's an electrical hazard if they're connected and the building isn't safe.
Electrified, sure.
but
So
that's,
the fact
but that's
this-
Greene
these
County
panels weren't
Building
even
Department.
So
alive.
that's
That's
Greene
Greene
County.
County, that's not the village. The village does require the permit as an accessory structure, whether you've plugged it in live or not.
That's what my question was, like, so, that's why I asked you about how do we permit, as a customer of yours. So now, you did the same thing, but you didn't come to the village to get a permit, whether your solar panels were working or not. I don't know why, the question was, why did you do that in the first place? Why did you put the solar panels up there that were
Because I
not
wanted
gonna
to see what
work?
they look like.
Okay, all right, you left them
But
up there for a while.
they're waste material. I mean, they're not solar panels. Solar panels are
Okay.
panels that produce energy, right?
I just want
These
to,
don't
I just
produce
want
energy.
to, I just want to understand the reasoning of why you did it.
Well, I think I explained in the beginning that it was a product R&D,
Mm-hmm.
design, and I wanted it at least to get the panels up to take pictures before I was forced to take my structure down.
Okay,
And I thought it was a great fortuitous opportunity, because I was already forced to remove the panels from my front yard, because I was trying to make a fence out of them, and that wasn't allowed. So which I still don't understand. So I had to figure out somewhere to put them, and I thought, well, why not put them where they were originally intended, and I'll take some pictures and.
That's an interesting comment, because I never received a fence permit for you to put anything in the front yard, and this is the first time I've ever heard you mention that you wanted to use solar panels as a fence in the front yard. I don't have a permit for that.
I've submitted multiple site plans where I've
That's
showed
not a
fencing
permit.
around my property.
that was not indicated as anything
You
other
wrote
than
me an email
concept
once
drawings.
saying that the fence I had made out of pallets, I originally had a concept for using all the recycled pallets from these solar projects as a fence. And you wrote me an email saying, Brett, your pallet, if you're calling that a fence, it's actually 6 inches higher than it's supposed to be. Your fence has to be based on the natural grade of the property. So you were aware that I was doing fencing.
But that is not a permit.
Okay, but you just said
can
this is the first
you
you've
can-
heard of me wanting to do a fence.
Solar panels as a fence, I never.
These
have
aren't
heard-
solar panels. Solar panels
Okay.
produce energy.
Never mind,
If I could ask a question to clarify something
Yeah.
in the record.
yeah.
If I understand you correctly, the material is solar panels, but you do not intend to use them to produce energy.
They
You're
can't,
repur-
they can't produce energy.
Right, so you're repurposing the material.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's an upcycled material.
And to Denise's point, before, there are certain things that require permits before they can be installed. That's all the point that she was saying. She was unaware that you had asked, that you intended to put a fence up, and if you did, then a permit would need to have been obtained. That's all she's saying.
I think that's a couple questions, it's a couple things that I'm seeing that seems to be, I don't know if it's a pattern, it just seems to be that we're asking that you're asking forgiveness before you're asking permission. You're doing things, it appears that you're doing things before you get permitted to do them, and that's causing problems obviously, it's causing problems for you, it's giving you heartburn over this. That if you, at least it's giving you heartburn, if you're gonna follow, I mean, we all have to follow the permitting, the permitting process. So by doing what you're doing, you're getting in front of it, and then
Right.
you get the repercussions of, you didn't come and ask us.
Then you're
Or you-
telling me that there's an expiration date on when I do get a permit, and I don't, like I said, I have to experiment with what I want to
Sure.
do before I even know what I want to get permitted.
And we have businesses that do that, that have permits, and then they know they have to, after a year's up, they have to renew their permits to keep it going, otherwise it'll expire if they don't come back, and they have to go through the whole process again and start it all over. So I think that's where I'm trying to go with you, to give you the fair advantage, to go, if you're up front with it and you're doing the permitting up front, then you're gonna give yourself, you don't come to a situation like this where, we're coming at you, or people are asking you, you didn't follow the steps. And it's causing you problems that you're getting pushback. And that's what I'm trying to avoid for you, is saying, how do you make this path easier for you? And if you follow the rules up front, it makes it easier for you down the road, that you're not gonna that you're in compliance to begin with, and there's not gonna be an issue of you coming into
I
a problem like you're
appreciate
coming.
that.
Yeah,
Are you familiar with the brick building next to the hotel? I mean, the most iconic,
Yeah.
structure really in Yellow Springs. Do you think Alan knew what that building was going to look like when he started?
I can't answer that.
I don't think he did. I mean, he took it brick by brick and went with what the materials gave him, and he came up with something that is still standing. Would that have been permitted
Right.
if he came in?
But that's not the case. What we're talking about, Neil, is with what you're
Well, we're
doing.
not talking about the character of Yellow Springs.
But we're talking about what you're doing with your business, and what you're doing with your business, what you're doing with the shed, and just
What am I
following the
doing with my
procedures.
business? Is that illegal too?
Well, that's it, well,
That's not an item for this.
for a point of reference, okay?
Sorry to interrupt.
What's that?
Go ahead.
For a point of reference, there is a problem with the business, because do you have a permit? Did you get a conditional use permit for your business at 335?
No, I
West
have
Davis.
no idea what that.
So a home
entails.
business
It's called
needs
a
to
home
have.
occupation permit.
It's a home occupation permit, and you haven't come through the planning commission to operate a business from there. And that's why I was asking you, when you did do a business, when you do have a home business, you have to come through planning commission with a plan, with a home business, and you haven't done that at this point in time, at this stage of the game.
So I've been working with the village for the past 4 years under this home business, and you're telling me that now that you're gonna notify me that I've submitted my home address on probably 50 different applications.
Yep.
And
Yeah, you have.
now's the time to tell me that I'm.
Well, you'd let me know, I mean, this is the first I met you and know you, you told me, that's why I asked a couple of questions, that you told me you have a business there, that
Oh,
you're
my
running a business
goodness.
there. And that's why I wanted to
This
follow
feels
up.
like Howard Rourke in the Fountainhead. Are you guys familiar with the Fountainhead?
No, but I'd like to get back to the structure,
Okay,
because
that's
that's what
great.
we're here for. The way I look at it, your drawings, I'm not an architect or anything, it appears that the studs, or the wall studs, come out at
Yeah.
a slant. Okay? just trying to help you, if you made those straight up from the concrete pad and trimmed the roof, you're asking for an 8-inch variance, what I get. Is that true?
If he built
If
that
he built
structure.
structure straight
If he
up.
built that structure straight up,
from the pad.
and
It'd be
he
fine.
put
Right.
with a 1 foot overhang roof, he would be in compliance on the setback.
And we can argue about the heights of the building, because what I heard, you're 8 inches over the heights of the building.
10 inches, yeah.
10 inches
Without the solar panels.
without the solar panels, so then
It'll
he's
go to a foot,
12
almost a
feet
foot.
over.
It'll be a foot over.
Okay.
And going back to the idea of the permit issue and not having a permit, the original permit was issued for a storage shed, a shed. I mean, I gave you the paperwork on it.
Yeah,
There was no indication that it was to be used for a solar array / greenhouse / tiny house. And then it was in your own variance application that you opened the can of worms about the fact that you're running your business much more so than just having the address as your location. Lots of people do that. That didn't raise a red flag. When you started to say you had 32 projects, great for you, but you're having them all come to your house, that probably means you're having delivery trucks and you're having staff. And that is a conditional use hearing for a home occupation permit.
Sounds
I was
like
not
I'm gonna
aware
need
of
to
that.
be relocating myself out of the village. That's what I'm hearing. And
Or just
congratulations,
come,
you
or
guys
just come in,
succeeded.
or just come in to the zoning office and let's get all this paperwork together for your home occupation.
There are,
And
there are
that.
many people who have home occupations in the village.
Yeah.
It's not an unusual thing, it's just that the code requires that to be noticed, the neighborhood and can be impacted by that, and those neighbors have rights and.
Yeah, I thought I was serving the village by offering a record low, my business set a record low price for solar in basically the country. And I'm offering that to entire Greene County and Clark County as a service. That's a beautiful thing. More people can afford solar now, and being able to operate out of a home business is part of that. And, I didn't used to have to store my materials in my shed, but once we won all this co-op and, in order to be efficient, in order to, not go out of business, we had to stock up on material, and so they come
And no
that's
one
how
has said that you have to stop that, but you have to work with staff, come and see them, talk about the permit that you might need, and just
And
try to
have
make
you
it
come before the
compliant.
planning commission and get a
There's just a
hearing
process
for
to
it.
follow.
Yeah.
Nobody's saying you can't do it or that you have to stop at this moment, but you can't continue now that staff is aware that there's a home occupation there. They have an obligation as well to the rest of the citizens.
If it's only your address and you're doing paperwork there and you have all of your storage off-site and your deliveries off-site, it's a waiver. I don't even charge
My
for
deliveries
it.
are off-site for the most part. I mean, there's a couple that I guess come, but,
Yeah, I
my
mean,
guys
then
go to
that's
the
just,
electric supply
that's
and
just a waiver. But if you're actually having staff coming there and you're having deliveries there, and again, we're getting off topic
Yeah.
of what
Right.
the
I
setback.
mean, I don't have
we're
any
here for.
friends, so I feel like my employees make up for, the visitors that I get, that I would have had if I have friends.
They'll still come see you.
What's that?
They'll still come see you. Just, I know, I understand, I've been listening to you, and I understand. I've worked with people like you, in construction. You have your idea, but
Started
your
one.
process, it's just a process. There's no structured, or like a normal construction company, when you approach your shed, you're looking at it as art.
Yeah, I'm looking at it as
Right.
Yeah.
But we look at it as construction. No, sorry. And you can still do it as art, just you have to organize it better in timely fashions when you're doing permits. I know it's a headache, I've been in construction my whole life.
Yeah.
Because see, at least you're getting some leniency. If you're a company that goes in there and blows through these permits, they charge you thousands of dollars when you're not in compliance.
If
You know, you get hammered
if they're
as a
actual
business
building
in
permits.
construction on this, same
One of the- I
same
guess,
type of stuff
yeah.
you're doing.
Right.
You know, the difference, like you said, your structural engineer said you just have to add 5 boards.
Yeah.
If our structural engineer come in there and told us we had to add 5 boards and we didn't add those 5 boards, $1,000 fine.
Yeah.
Because they don't care if we have to tear it down, it's gotta be in compliance at all times. Or if it's not, you have to get waivers
Right.
for it to be that way.
Right,
And that's with
and-
historical buildings, especially
Yeah.
historical buildings
And
stuff.
part of this, I mean, part of the reason why I kind of wasn't in compliance or didn't communicate was I was going through a really rough period in my life. And, you know, it ended up in a separation with my wife and
So I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
it's like my
hopefully
priorities.
they get better, man.
my priorities were not in having to deal with, you know, what I thought were minor trivial issues to me. And what I was trying to fight for was a reason to live at the time, you know, so I pushed it away and I'm just like, and now I'm dealing with it. I'm back on my feet and, you know, I'm feeling great again. And, you know, whatever I have to do, I'll, you know, end up doing it. But I would like, you know, for the sake of, you know, the green, you know, aspect, there's so much effort and work and, you know, energy that's gone into this. It's like to make somebody like tear something down to rebuild, it just doesn't seem like it goes along with the values of what we claim to be as a.
And there's also rules that we have to follow,
Yeah.
because it doesn't matter if it's your business, my business, her business, his business, we all have to follow the rules, and if the rules are not followed.
You're really
then-
stuck on this business
Yeah,
thing.
it is, because I have my small business, and you know
Yeah.
what, I had to do my small business had to do exactly that. I had to go to Greene County, I had to go to the village, I had to do a number of things that I
Is
had to
this
follow.
Dino's, the
Yes.
coffee shop?
So I had to do a number of things that I needed to do,
Yeah.
and if I didn't, and then I
Right.
get I come with the plans, they look at the plans, they say, yes, looks like it's good, we'll allow it, they approve it, and then they come out and they get inspect me. So I mean, I'm following the path, which every
I
business
mean, I
has to
feel
follow
like
the
a retail
path.
business is a little different than.
It's no different.
I mean, I
We're
don't
all
have
business.
customers come into my house.
Yeah,
or-
business is
yeah.
business, and we have to follow the policies. We have to follow the procedure, and that's what the issue is following the procedure, because then you have anarchy. I mean, then if there's an exception for you, then what's to say there's not gonna be exception with this next person? What about the next person that says, I'm not gonna follow the rules, this one didn't, so why do I have to? So that's why we're here, just trying to get along, to get that put out there so that we understand that there's a procedure, and then it goes along with the variances that you've asked for, that we want to look at, that we strictly want to look at your variances of the setback and the height. Those are the things that we want to, again, bringing it all together to say, full picture, we got a good tight fit, and you've got a good tight fit, and then you can proceed along with your business, which is what we all want. I mean, the business is a sound business, but we want you to be profitable, but we also want you to follow the rules and just get it to be in line with what needs to be done. That's it. I mean, that's simple, that's the simple matter of it. It's, you know, it's not being picked on that you're coming after. It's just like, you know, we all have, every business has to follow along, and that's what the codes are set up for us to follow. And that's what we do. Is there anybody, you guys have any other questions?
Yeah, I think we're a little bit off track. Can you make the building you have now in compliance with the current statute?
Well, I had a plan to move it.
No, answer the question. Can you make the building you have now with modifications meet the current zoning law?
Yes, I can. I could, if that's what's needed. Yes.
I think that would solve a lot of the problems. I can't say, I can't speak for everybody on the board, but I think getting a 12-inch height might be acceptable to the village. The overhang from the letters I wrote and that's not, you'll probably lose that one. But I just want to know if you could make it, and what kind of time frame could you do this in? I mean, this has dragged on for 6 years.
Well, I'm firing on all cylinders now, so I can make things happen pretty quick.
Is it,
Is that 2 weeks, 4 weeks?
It's like, if you could give me 4 weeks. I mean, I'm on a deadline with like 15 customers right now to get their solar
we
projects done
understand that,
before the
it's
end of the
winter,
year.
but if you, the 2x4s that go out, not the straight, if you bring those straight up, is that a doable job?
It's doable, yeah.
Okay. I have no further questions at this time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be higher at that point than it is now. I mean,
What?
And you may,
if I bring the, you know, the angled walls
Because we have
in,
more
those,
questions
you know, those
after you
are
hear
like,
from the
those are 15-foot oak, 2x8s. And if you take the angle out,
It's
I mean,
gonna
when
be
you put an
higher than a
angle.
foot above is what you're saying. It's gonna,
That's all.
it's raised the roof. But you could always cut those boards and make the roof 12 feet.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Are
Right,
you
what
guys
I-
familiar with Chuck Taylor's
What I like to do-
shed?
No.
Chuck
that-
on Thistle Creek?
That's okay. What we like to do is, I think we're at a point now where we want to open up the public hearing to
Okay.
let the residents ask questions. that may have questions or have commentary, and then we could come back and ask questions from them that they bring to the table.
Thank you.
Yes. And I'll keep time for you.
Okay, at this point in time, we give everybody 3 minutes.
Yep.
3 minutes to talk. Who would like to go first? Please state your name.
Hi, my name's Mitzi Miller, and I live on West Limestone Street, but my back street's on West Davis. I own the whole 2 lots. So my backyard's right next to Mr. Henderson's house. This structure has impacted me negatively. What started to be a shed grew into something much bigger. My privacy is seriously affected because of this structure being so tall. And I put up a privacy fence and peering over that. It is my opinion that it is an eyesore, and it's it seriously affects my property value. And I think that's been stated in Home Inc. If he would have taken it down, the property value, his property value would probably go up. I have a safety concern, given the structure's material and shady construction. I was one who called 2017, and then last year, 2018, I was walking to my garage and actually saw the plastic separate, and I've heard noises at night when we had snowstorms. Strong winds could cause the roof and adjacent material to come off in my yard, and that's been a concern of mine, and injure people, pets, damage my property or come into windows. He did take off the extra, I call it the perch, up above, where it had triangular points on each side of them, which if a wind blew could have been really dangerous, but that's off. The solar panels are off. I believe it's time that he gets the clear message from zoning that he needs to respect and follow the rules and the laws. It's not just him, it's our neighborhood and our neighbors who are concerned. The other thing that I'm just going to bring up, and I want to thank you for bringing up, has anybody measured this? And I've brought that up because there are different things that say different sizes, and no matter what, I feel adamant, it's a shed, it should be 12 feet tall. Thank you.
Can I ask one, do I have the right to ask you a question at a time? Can you take this diagram, can you show me where your house is?
I can
I'm
try
not
to,
familiar. I
sir.
drove by, I think that's his house. It's
Yeah,
in red.
in red, yeah.
And I couldn't understand where yours
Okay,
was.
Mine's right here at the dead end, and my
Oh.
driveway is right here, my backyard's right here. Both neighbors have put up privacy fences at this point.
Okay.
Mainly I have because he's.
Oh, that's fine. I didn't know when you said Limestone Street, that's why it had me
Yes.
confused.
So the house is up front, my garage is in back, and this is a dead end right here.
Oh, okay, that's when you meant you owned two, yeah, that's why I drove by to look at it.
Yeah,
But this is the front of your house? now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. I just didn't have a good picture.
thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Lauren Miller. I happen to be Mitzi's sister, and I've been to the property a number of times because I've mowed her lawn, or I've checked on cats, or robbed her garden, and other such things. One of the concerns that I have is that over the course of the many years that Brett's been working on his project, I've seen it morph from one thing to another thing to something else. And I have some concerns as to what it is, what its purpose is, and what it's going to stay at. And so, whereas it may be today talked about as a shed, what is it going to be in 2 weeks? What is it going to be in 2 months? You know, and I know from Brett's description, that he as an artist does change his vision, perhaps, of it. And that may morph also. But I know it has caused my sister enormous stress. And I would like to see the village take some responsibility and give clarity to Brett about what the expectations are, and to be reasonable at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Brett Knickerbocker, the second Brett in the room. My wife and I moved to Yellow Springs in April. We bought 327 West Davis Street, which is 2 houses below the red box. It's 2 houses east of Mr. Henderson's. And we love the neighborhood. We bought the house a lot for the Yellow Springs, just quaintness and the culture that Mr. Henderson was talking about. We feel like our backyard in 327 is just an oasis, and we love it. It's quiet and beautiful. We almost bought a house on Lisa Lane on the south side, but there was a really big house peering into the backyard, and we felt that that really affected the property value there, and we ended up choosing our current house instead of the Lisa Lane one because of, it must have been a 25-foot tall house peering down to the backyard, and it was really, we really liked the house, but it was weird. So I really admire Mr. Henderson's, his solar business. We loved the uniqueness of the street. He used to have kind of like some artistic stuff in the front, and we thought that was kind of weird, but kind of interesting as well. I've spoken with Mrs. Miller, or Miss Miller, a bit about it. I'm only directly impacted via property value mostly. From our backyard, we can see Mr. Henderson's structure. I wouldn't call it a super eyesore. However, I really sympathize with Miss Miller about the height being right next to her, because that decided our house, Lisa Lane versus West Davis Street. So I really sympathize with that, and I can definitely see how that would be a privacy issue. Do you have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Do you have children?
No children yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
do you see an inordinate amount of traffic going down the street?
I would say I do not.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm Richard Zopp, and I just have a question. I'd like to hear the code statement of how you measure a setback.
I think that has to go to Denise.
Well, it's in the packet. Let me look it up.
Well, I've tried to look it up online, and I haven't been successful.
It's under building volume.
Get the packet.
So the current code, which is 5 feet from the side and 10 feet from the rear.
I understand the numbers.
Okay, I'm just clarifying it for everybody, okay? Thank you. Building envelope. The maximum 3-dimensional volume on a lot which a structure can be built as permitted by applicable height and setback requirements. The previous zoning code determined setbacks by what was defined as building edge. The building edge definition is the horizontal limit of a building, including the drip or eave line of all roofs, carports, permanent awnings, and decks. So wherever the eave is,
That's the previous code.
no, that's now the new one too. Wherever the eaves are, the 3-dimensional volume of the entire building, the maximum 3-dimensional volume on a lot within which the structure can be built as permitted by the applicable height and setback requirements. So if the setback requirement is 5 feet, that building, the entire building volume has to be outside of that setback.
So a building volume is if you put a rectilinear, you looked at it from above and projected it down onto the ground.
Correct,
Yes.
That's what that means.
yes.
Because volume to me is, you know.
Okay, I would ask that the back and forth need to stop. Does the board fully understand how to measure side setback?
Yes.
Thank you.
I believe I do, yes.
Any other comments? I'm going to close the public hearing. Any questions from us? Do we have any other further questions that we have? Let's come up.
No, I think we pretty much got it left. Well, there's only two things that we really made here for.
So here's what my suggestion would be, is that you have a couple choices here. You can go through the variance standards that are contained in the code, in 127804 variances, subsection A, and there are 8 variances. However, it is not clear, at least to me, based upon the conversations, what now is the request. There's been some discussion that this shed may actually be at least close to complying, at least as far as height. So I'm not sure what you're, what you're being asked to do at this point, because it's not entirely clear that it's still a 3-foot and a 5-foot request for setback and height. 3-foot setback, 5-foot height. Which I'm gathering from the comments of this panel, that is a significant issue to you.
Yeah.
Certainly 10 inches is different than 5 feet, right?
Yeah.
So you could certainly ask the applicant what the intention is, because it sounds to me as if this has been a moving target in some ways. Or you can take the application as is and then vote on it as been presented to you, which is for a 3-foot setback variance and a 5-foot height variance. Which also then means that Mr. Henderson could come forward and ask you to consider a different request.
And then one of the questions we have too is that he said he was going to put panels on the roof.
Well, then we could get into conditions or
Which gives you different height. It's
clarifications.
gonna give you a different height. It'll give us almost a foot. If he's at 12.10, and he says about a foot, I mean, it's about an inch to.
Well,
Inch and a half.
what I've heard is that the solar panels that would be put on would, yes, that would increase the height, but they're not going to be used to generate electricity.
The ones he has now. In the future,
Oh, yeah, they will be.
in the future, yes.
just a mock-up.
But you're going to do that, right? Come on up.
Yeah, that would be, I mean, the
Okay.
grand, finale would, generate energy with that rooftop.
So there's at this point in time, there's no reason to put the solar panels up there unless they're going to be active. At this stage of the game, knowing what we all know now, that would be the intent, is if you're gonna put solar
Well-
panels up, there's no reason to,
It's functional as a greenhouse as well as a solar energy farm for my house. And if the solar panels aren't permitted, if that's not acceptable, I mean, I could always put the solar panels on my house. That was a potential issue for Home Inc. because I was changing the affordability of the house because of putting solar panels. So that was one of the reasons why I was trying to locate them on the shed is, it's something that I could take with me, I guess, if I ever sold the house.
and then again, as what he says, as soon as you put them up on the roof,
You're outside.
then, as soon as you put it on the roof of the shed, then you gotta get Green Counties coming in on you then, right? Then you have to meet their standards. It opens you up to a whole, something that we won't deal with, that's something that Green County inspects on.
I mean, I still have to get a zoning permit for the solar through the village.
Right. So I guess my question is, what is your intent for the roof? Are you going to, is that your intent?
I would love to put bifacial solar panels on the roof.
Right, so loving and doing, is it your plan? I mean, I think that's what I want to nail down is,
You have to define what you're asking for.
because if we don't know, we can't make a decision if we don't know what we're making a decision on, if you're not clear with us. I guess I'm asking you to commit.
I mean, well, is it like, well, I mean, if I get to keep the shed, I won't put solar panels on. If I say I'm gonna put solar panels on and I can't keep the shed, then I don't want the solar panels. I mean, so those would be my, can I petition those two choices? I mean,
Well, it's not an either or. You have to say
Say
what you want. What do you want?
I wanna keep the shed.
Okay.
That's my primary
If you
function,
want to
would
keep
be
the
to keep the
shed,
shed.
if you want to keep the shed,
Yeah.
and the shed, if you say to this body that the shed is going to be no higher than 12 feet, then you don't need a height variance. If it's above 12 feet, you would
Well,
need a
right
height
now
variance.
it's 12 foot 10 inches,
All right,
the way it is.
so does that mean that you're going to ask for a 10-inch height variance or a 12-inch height variance in anticipation of the solar panels potentially coming in?
I would just say a 10-inch height
Okay.
variance.
Now, is the solar panel's gonna add height to it?
Yeah,
Well,
he's
they
not
want to
doing
put them
these-
on.
Yeah,
I'm
that's what you said,
not-
an inch and a
Well,
half,
but
that's
you
what
should,
it is.
Yeah,
if that's the
that's what-
case and it's only 2 inches, save yourself a step and ask them to do it now.
Well, yeah, I mean, if I could go from 10 inches to 12 inches, and I don't know if that changes the nature of the
You can put
function of the
conditions on
structure from a solar racking system versus a shed.
What we're leading you into, what we're trying to get to is that
What do you want the
if you
variance
decide you're gonna
for?
put solar panels in there, then you've already got the height clearance, you already got permission for that, as far as, on your height.
Right.
Not permission to do it, that's what we don't do, but you would have it in your variance that you have, take it in the height, the 1.5 inch, extra height that would add to your roof.
It's almost a
Into
foot,
this.
yeah, so it's gonna be a foot. Basically, it's
Right.
almost, we round it, it's gonna be close to a foot. The variance is a foot.
It would be a foot, and I would just, as a precedent, reference Thistle Creek Lane, there's at least a 20-foot
Not-
shed structure.
This is your structure.
Yeah.
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 We're looking at your structure. And that's what we need, the commitment from you. What are you, again, this is, I think, what we're running into the problem with, just the history that we're seeing here is that it's a moving target for us. I don't know where we can't figure out where you're at. Because you're telling us this, you're over here, you want that, you don't want this. I do want panels, I don't want panels. We need a definite to make a decision. I can't make, you're making it difficult for us to make a decision to give you guidance.
Yeah.
For you to be in compliance.
But what I heard, you want a variance of 12 inches in height,
Yes, that would be ideal.
okay?
So we're clear then, that would require you to say that you're modifying your request from 5 feet to 1 foot on the height variance.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes,
And
I'm
then-
modifying my.
All right,
my
then on the setback issue,
Yeah.
which was a 3-foot setback request, we've kind of been all over the map there too, because what I've heard is that there is a design that maybe has been presented or certainly been discussed, that you would not need a setback variance at all.
With a redesign, which needs a permit.
But that doesn't need the BZA approval,
No.
that's through Denise.
Right.
That was where you took the,
You went straight up.
we went
Take the
straight
flare
up.
out, just go straight on that fence.
Or the way, if you decide not to do that and you keep it like that, then you have to ask for a 2-foot variance? That's what we don't know what you're asking for.
Yeah.
We figured out the height, now we gotta figure out the variance on the side, and I think.
Well, if I did that, and if I brought the walls in, I would have to cut anyway.
All we
and
wanna
I'm
know
like,
is
I could
what
just
you
cut it
want.
to the 12-foot at that point.
We just wanna know what you
Right,
want.
nobody's telling you what to do, this is about what
want.
what are you asking for?
I mean, ideally, I would like to have a roof overhang that's 2.5 feet, 2.5 foot variance on the setback, and a 1 foot height.
Mr. Anderson, you're thinking out loud right now, turn that into an ask, what are you asking for?
So can I ask you guys what's acceptable, or what you guys?
No,
want?
because you have to
I-
ask, and then they will determine if it's acceptable, it's not a negotiation.
I feel like it's like, do you want behind door number 1 or door number 2?
Well, I mean,
But
your other, choice is they will deny it completely based on what you have right now. I mean, so you need to, they're giving you
Yeah, it's
an
no longer
opportunity
5
here.
foot. I mean, right now it's 10, or it's 8 inches, 8 to 10 inches.
Yeah, we're good on the height, now we're on the side.
We understand where you are on the height. Now we're talking about the side setback, which currently, your application wanted a 3-foot variance. Are you sticking by the 3-foot variance? Are you gonna make it less, or you want more? Are you gonna don't need a variance at all? You can
You
cut the
Roll the
sides.
dice.
Can you tell me what the time frame would be required to put it into, like, the compliance with what I request? Because it would take some work too.
What would, again, you would ask for a period of time to come into compliance, then they could consider the reasonableness of that request and make that a condition of the approval, because then you would be committing to that timeline. They don't want to tell you the timeline without you saying when you reasonably can get it done. But it can't be a year.
Yeah, any time after 2020 would be great, but, yeah, I can take, I don't need the side setback variance, I mean, really, I don't really need the height, the variance at that point either, but I mean, if I can get extra height, I mean, that's the beauty of, I
If
can
you,
get out of the shade of
if
my
you
house.
ask for it, you have the possibility of getting it. If you don't ask for it, then you won't get it. So if you would like it, you need to ask for it.
Well, I would like a 1-foot height variance and, a 2.5-foot setback variance. And if I don't get those, then I'll put it in, can I put it in compliance?
That's a different issue. That's a different issue. Because if you put it into compliance, you don't need to do anything other than to make sure that the permits were there to do
Right.
whatever it is you're doing.
And it's
That's between
structurally sound for
Denise-
the solar
right.
panels, yeah.
That's a zoning administrator issue. This BZA body only meets to grant and consider variance requests. That's the reason why they haven't met since March. They don't meet very often. So these are unique situations. They're done on a case-by-case basis because they're unique to you and your use and ownership of the property. Not use, but enjoyment, I'll say. So a 30-inch variance is what you're requesting
Yeah.
for the setback, and a 12-inch height variance.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And does the 30-inch variance, setback variance, require moving any of these walls in, or is that what the existing variance is? Or not the variance? but
That's
the
what it is
existing-
right now.
Okay.
That's what it
Okay,
is.
all right.
It's actually 3 feet.
Because if it's 3 feet, if they grant 30,
How do you
it's-
know that?
Because you indicated you took 2 feet off of it and we had a 0 lot line.
I mean, it's a rough estimate. I guess you'd have to hang a plumb line
Okay,
down
well, we
from the
can't
roof
deal with
edge.
rough estimates, so when we get to that point, if they're gonna grant this for you, I need permission to go on your property and measure all of this. Okay? I've not been able to do that, and I want that,
Okay.
so.
Well, to be safe, then I would call it 36-inch, 36-inch variance and a 12-inch height variance.
I was wanting a 1-foot height variance and a 3-foot setback.
Yep. Okay, so now, if there's nothing else from Mr. Henderson, then you would, I guess, close that hearing, if it hasn't been closed already, and then go through the factors that are set forth in 1278.04.
Okay.
When one looks at A, and it's under A, variances from the terms of the code shall be granted only where the applicant shows that the strict application of a zoning requirement causes practical difficulties in the use of the property. The factors to be considered and weighed by the board in determining whether a property owner has encountered practical difficulties in the use of the property include, but are not limited to. And then there are 8 factors that guide you. Some of these factors may be applicable. Some of these factors may carry more weight than others for you. But each of you independently exercise your judgment. You go through each one by one to determine whether or not a factor weighs in favor or not, or is not applicable.
And this does not determine our decision, but just a guidance of
That's
getting
the
to our
guide, and then
decision.
at the end that you will
You make
make, you will say where you stand on each of those
Okay.
factors, and then you will ultimately vote. And you can, Is
We're gonna
this-
have
is this
two
one
votes?
application,
Sorry, is this
Denise?
two votes or one vote?
Is this one application or two?
What- he-
Is the variant, was the variance submitted as two
No.
separate variances or one variance?
One.
You can break it out depending on where you think you're gonna end up. I think that you'll know when you get there.
Okay.
Because you could grant one, not the other. You could deny
Well,
both, you could
yeah.
grant both.
Okay.
And I'm gonna need, staff is gonna need to understand the intent of the solar panels after you get through this.
And then there may be some conditions as
Yeah,
well that staff may
absolutely.
request, such as access to the property for purposes of measuring. You may want a complete by date.
I need a structural engineer report that says that he's been in compliance with making it structurally sound for solar panels.
We'll
Great-
we'll get there.
And
Denise,
Right,
Green County
but-
needs
yeah.
to get involved then.
Yeah, well, they will, because once he comes and gets a permit from me, he'll take it to Green County and they're gonna do an inspection as well. Yeah, for electrical.
So do you want Judy to go through the factors for you?
Please.
Please.
Would you prefer to consider first the height variance and go through the factors, and then the side setback variance and go through the
I
factors?
would like it to do it that way. That makes sense to me.
Okay,
So we're
okay.
doing height.
we're doing
Okay.
height. So in granting relief of 12 inches to the height requirement, the first question to you is whether the property in question will yield a reasonable return or whether there can be any beneficial use of the property without the variance. And then I will call roll, and you will give me a yes or a no response. And just let me know when you're ready for roll call.
Yes.
Okay, so Anthony is yes.
Yep.
No.
Dino, no. Scott?
No.
Okay. The second question is whether the variance is substantial. And I'll go ahead and call you. I'm going to
Okay.
start with Anthony.
Okay. Whether the variance, I do not think it's substantial,
So that is a no.
no.
Scott?
No.
Dino?
Yes.
Okay. And question 3, whether the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered or whether adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the variance. Scott?
Yes.
All right. Dino?
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes.
Question 4, whether the variance would adversely affect the delivery of governmental services such as water distribution, sanitary sewer collection, electric distribution, stormwater collection, or refuse collection. Dino?
Yes.
Scott?
How do you justify that?
Please.
How really? How do you justify that?
We're going through the
That's not-
questions
that's
here.
Really?
We have to go through
How
these
do you
questions.
explain yourself?
We have to go through these
Explain
questions.
yourself.
These are
No,
our
you-
standards that we have to go through. These
Go
are
for
just
it.
standards that
Give
we're
me-
going
give me-
through.
Give me an explanation.
You're
How
out
do
of
you
order.
justify
This
that?
isn't your, you're out of order. This
Of
isn't your
course I
place.
am. You are too.
I know, that's,
You're out of order of logic. My goodness.
please,
Here we go.
Do you want to close the hearing at this time?
yes,
or
we forgot to, we
Are
didn't,
you, can you sit down?
Mr. Henderson, we
I would
we
love
did.
to sit down.
Please, yep, I did not close the hearing. That was my fault.
No,
Sorry
no,
for
you
not closing
closed the
physical
hearing. I
vote.
mean,
Okay.
stop the
No.
hearing, stop the proceeding, was
If-
what I was
If the
referring to.
proceedings became too disruptive, you would have the power
To
to
close.
either ask the applicant to leave, you could stop the proceedings and
Okay.
simply.
No, we'll continue. I want to continue. We're going to go down the road.
So we were on question 4. Scott,
Yes.
do you need me to read that again, or are you with me?
Oh, yes, please read again.
All right, that question is whether the variance would adversely affect the delivery of governmental services such as water distribution, sanitary sewer collection, electric distribution, stormwater collection, or refuse collection.
No.
Anthony?
No.
Question 5, whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of the zoning restriction. Dino?
How do we answer that? He's not the property owner.
Well, it be,
He's not the property owner. He
That-
can't speak for that. or-
well, I think that because he has the 99-year lease, he has obligations to maintain the property under that lease, that you can take that factor into when he acquired the possessory interest of the property, because this is not a traditional landlord-tenant relationship.
So for purposes of this question, we
You
consider
would assume
him the
him to be
property
the
owner.
property owner.
Okay.
Okay.
And
No.
that, Dino, no. All right, Scott?
No.
Anthony?
Just a second, reading again, whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of the zoning restriction. No, I don't think he knew the zoning restriction.
All right, 6, whether the property owner's predicament feasibly can be obviated through some method other than a variance. Scott?
Can we define obviated?
Can the predicament
Avoided.
be, yeah, resolved by some other means other than a
Resolved is
variance?
better, yeah.
Well, that's kind of a trick question. It really is. Yeah, there's always another way to do something. Yeah, Bobby, what does it mean, like,
Well,
Like
I'll say two things, I'm sorry, Judy.
Yeah.
Is that without,
Swing or-
staff can't tell you what to do, but I would
I
point
just
out
want
to
to
you.
know, I mean, is it like, is there another easier option? Is that what this is asking?
Well, if you
for?
go back to the standards within the code, under A, it talks about whether or not the application of the zoning requirement causes practical difficulties in the use of the property. In the context of area variances, sometimes it can be because lots are configured in an unusual way, for example.
Okay.
So, and then the other part of this is that whether the applicant shows that the strict application of the zoning requirement causes practical difficulties in the use of the property.
Okay. And it's also dealing with this building as it stands as of right now. Okay.
No reason to-
Well, you don't consider the existence of the building, but for purposes of this, you have to assume the building doesn't exist.
Oh, okay.
Whether the property owner's predicament feasibly can be obviated through some method other than variance.
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes,
Dino?
Yes.
Question 7, whether the existing conditions from which a variance is being sought were self-created. Dino?
Yes.
Anthony?
yes,
Scott?
Yes.
And the final question is whether the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed and substantial justice done by granting the variance. Anthony?
you gotta read that again just a second. Whether the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement be observed. Granting variance. And the variance we're talking about was 1 foot and 3 feet.
Correct.
Yeah, I thought you were splitting it up.
Just splitting it up.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what just on the
Splitting it
height.
up.
this is the height?
Yep.
This is the
Okay.
height.
With the spirit and intent behind is it? Boy, the way you went to the spirit, so if we allow the foot, would be observed substantial justice done by the. Yes,
Dino?
Yes.
it's 1 foot.
Scott?
Yes.
All right.
Now, do you want to now?
We should probably vote on it.
Vote, okay.
That would be
So
easier.
now I would point out that under the same code section, 127804, we are now looking at B, the board shall determine, after weighing the factors described above, and any other factors the board deems relevant. So if there's anything else that is of consequence to you by way of the evidence that you heard and the information that you've received that has an impact on your decision, you could raise that now, which is where it says the board shall determine after weighing the factors described above and any other factors the board deems relevant, whether the property owner has shown practical difficulties so inequitable as to justify granting a variance to the property owner. So is there anything else that you've heard as it relates to height only?
don't have anything else.
Are we looking at the commitment of it, of?
I can't
Yeah,
answer the
seems-
question for you. You,
All right, this is my problem that I have, and I think we've unearthed it, is that the commitment that I need something definite that we're going to be in compliance with. What we say here is going to be followed going forward. That is my trouble spot. That is my spot that I'm having a problem with as far as.
The way I understand we voted on, you're considering, is it okay to add 1 foot variance to the height of the building? Not
Correct.
what he's going to do with it, just if he's going to add 1 foot. If he adds solar panels or lead panels, that's a different issue. He's got to get the right approval for that,
Okay.
the way I see the issue.
correct, and let me say this another way, is that whether there's something currently on the property or not is irrelevant to your discussion. The assumption here is that an applicant has come forward to say, it is my desire to do X as a future act. And that by getting the permission to do it, that person will comply with the scope of what that person requests. If something is later determined to be non-compliant, that's a separate set of issues that staff will deal with that is beyond the scope of anything that this BZA would do.
And we can't put, one more question, we're not putting any conditional uses on later after this?
That
Okay,
could
okay.
become part of it.
Okay.
If, for example, staff says that they want the applicant to agree that there would be permission to enter the property
Okay.
for purposes of measuring height or setbacks, absolutely.
Okay.
For determining compliance, yeah, you have the power to do that. Then I
Okay.
would say that as an example.
Okay. I'm good then, at this point.
I'm good.
I
So
said
do-
it, believe.
So do we take a motion to approve the
I-
height variance at this point and just,
Well,
Get that one
that's a great
done.
question. So here's where you are. That you have a choice someone can move to approve the variance, or someone can move to disapprove the variance. But then it would require a second. Under the zoning code, there would have to be a unanimous vote of all three of you to agree.
And there's no conditions, not putting any conditions
Well,
in
we'll
at
get to
this
that.
date, but this is.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
So right now, we're just voting,
Height.
a visible box is gonna be 13.
I make the motion, we accept the variance of 1 foot in the height of the
Unless we change it,
structure.
I've just looked at it here.
it's,
Am I looking at the
it
old
is
code?
changed, you are looking at it.
Whoops.
Okay, so it is, hold on, we need to clarify something.
Okay.
To make it- So it is now majority, not three?
Correct.
Okay, so majority of the existing quorum.
Yes, we
I was
changed that.
wrong, thank you Denise. It's a majority of the three of your votes, so 2-1 would be in approval of the variance. So the first question then is, what's the do you want a motion to approve, a motion to deny? That's
We
the
have a
starting
motion.
place.
I made the motion
Okay.
to approve.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. I mean,
Well, it functionally does for purposes of what you're
Okay.
acting on, yeah.
I'll second that.
Okay,
And then with that, then would be
all right,
the vote.
I'll call the roll. Osterholm,
Yay, yes.
all right. Selmanson,
yes.
Pallotta,
Yes.
Now, my suggestion would be then we move into the setback, and then you can talk about whatever conditions after you've determined whether or not you want to approve the setback variance. Right. So now, you will be weighing the factor, the exact same factors again, and again, the assumption is that there is no structure there, and going through those 8 factors again. Okay?
ready,
There you go, Judy.
folks? Okay, so again, this is on side setback. Whether the property in question will yield a reasonable return or whether there can be any beneficial use of the property without the variance. Anthony,
I'm reading it again, the way you word these, whether the property in question will yield a reasonable return, or whether there can be benefit without the variance. Yes.
Dino,
No.
Scott,
We're reading that question differently, I think.
yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm right or you're right, but
The way, the interpretation of A1 is that if there's no variance granted, does the property owner still have beneficial use of the property?
I stand with my yes.
Okay,
Yes.
You know, are you standing with your yes?
Yes.
you are a yes.
Or no, I mean, you said no, I'm sorry.
I know, why don't you just word it the way you did?
Clarify
You
with
want,
Dina.
you want
No.
that clarified? So
I'm good.
you're
You're
good
still staying
no?
with no? Okay.
Okay, Scott?
Yes,
Okay. The second question, whether the variance is substantial. Scott?
yes,
Dino?
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes,
Third question, whether the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered or whether the adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the variance. Anthony?
substantial, no.
Scott?
no,
Okay, Dino?
Yes.
Okay. Question 4, whether the variance would adversely affect the delivery of governmental services such as water distribution, sanitary sewer collection, electric distribution, stormwater collection, or refuse collection. Dino?
Yes.
Scott?
no,
Anthony?
No,
Okay, question 5, whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of the zoning restriction. Anthony?
no,
Dino?
Nope.
Scott?
no,
Question 6, whether the property owner's situation can reasonably be made better through some method other than a variance.
But we need to say obviated because that's what the code says.
Okay.
Okay, whether it can be obviated.
and we know what that means now.
Dino?
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes,
Scott?
yes,
Question 7, whether the existing conditions from which a variance is being sought were self-created. Scott?
yes,
Anthony?
yes,
Dino?
Yep.
And question 8, whether the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed and substantial justice done by granting the variance. Dino?
that's one of the, spirit and intent of the zoning requirement would be observed and given substantial.
Yes.
Scott?
yes,
Anthony?
No,
All right.
And whether or not there's any other factors that come into consideration that you want to share that, again, is the board deems relevant on the issue of setback. And again, that standard being whether the property owner has shown practical difficulties so inequitable as to justify granting a variance to the property owner.
So if moving of the building would make everything in compliance.
Well, a setback, it has to do with the placement of a structure, by definition.
to
I think,
include,
I think he's asking that because the original variance application was for
Well,
relocation.
you know what, that's a fair question in
It
the
was
context
for
of
relocation.
one of the factors because of what the zoning code was at the time and knowledge of the code and other things, you know.
I'm just kinda gonna go with Carrie Campbell's letter, because that's the neighbor. If you look at the houses on the right where this, setback would be in question, correct?
That's correct.
And, she even writes in her letter that they don't have a problem with the shed. So, I mean, if the neighbor that's actually in direct, the set off, setback should be 4, doesn't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with it, at that point, if we can give them a variance on that, because just knowing that the neighbor, that this would affect the most in that scenario, doesn't seem to have an issue with it.
So you're considering the input of a neighbor, and you're considering.
Yeah, and just like with, I also considered, Mitzi's, when we were dealing with the heights. You know, we got it down from 17 feet, we got to 13 feet, and he put solar panels in, that's gonna put it within reasonable, I would think.
Is there anything else before the motion is made?
That's all I.
Same
wanted to
options
add
again.
as far as-
Motion to approve the variance request, or a motion to deny?
Well, so now I'm confused.
You are.
We have a motion on the side setback, we do not have a motion on the height variance. And now we're getting a motion on this third
The
thing
setback.
without,
What do you call
We
it?
did height.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
that's
sorry,
what-
Height was-
We
I'm
did the
sorry.
height. We did the height.
I'm sorry, setback.
Okay.
My apologies.
We did the height, now we're doing setback.
Yep.
you walked through height, but that we didn't take a motion and a vote on height.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, we did.
They did, yeah.
We approved it.
That's done.
Oh,
We approved it.
Yeah.
good lord. Okay, my apologies.
Maybe you should take one of my power naps before you do these things.
Oh, about the next. Okay, all right. My apologies, so you're good? We're down to the
With the
side
height.
setback. Vote, so you've got a motion on the floor. Do you want me to call the roll on an approval to?
Well, I haven't heard a
We
motion
haven't
in a
heard a motion
second.
yet. There's been no motion yet.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm back an entire page. Sorry.
One quick question. Now, we distinctly got it down to 3 feet, correct? Is that what it?
That's what he's asked for.
All right, that's what I make sure.
You're trying to make the motion.
My turn to make it?
Yeah.
I make a motion to approve.
Move to approve a variance of 3 feet to
3
the side
feet,
setback. A
variance
variance
of
of
3
2
feet.
feet. Sorry, variance of 2. Variance.
I have a parliamentary question. If that's seconded, that doesn't mean you have to vote for it.
No.
Correct.
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 I'll second that. I just didn't want to commit that early.
Okay. Okay. So now do we
We're voting.
call the roll on that? Okay, got it.
And we'll approve
Osterholm,
it, so-
Approve.
yes. Selmanson,
Abstain.
But can't do that.
Kent,
Can't do that.
I love you, man.
Thank you. I thought it was a cute move.
Nice, well played.
3 foot, so just 2 feet on the one side. I'll approve it.
Pallotta,
No.
all right.
So now the question is are there any conditions that you want relative to the two variances that have been approved?
Yes.
Conditions that allow us to measure it.
Access, so that would be access to the property for
access to
purposes
the
of
pro- yep, to measure height and
setback
and
width.
setback. What do you want to do about the solar panels?
Well, I'm not gonna permit the solar panels until the structural engineer has approved
Well,
it, so he
well,
can't
the-
put them on there.
Now,
So-
this is
yeah,
where you
they
get
can't
into.
get on there.
Well, this is where you get into, now, you voted on the variance as if the structure wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
But
Now, you know the structure's there. And I think that I don't want to speak for you, Denise, but you've mentioned a number of times concerns over the structural integrity of the building, not just as it pertains to the potential for the solar panels,
Just in general.
but the structural integrity of the building as it currently exists.
Who's going to determine that?
Well, that would be done by an outside structural engineer to attest to that. And I would think under these circumstances, that if this board chose to do it, I think it's within your power to place a condition that would say you also have to demonstrate
Yeah, I
structural
think that's
integrity of the.
important.
yeah,
Yeah. that would be another condition.
And
We would like,
that you could place a date to have that information put forward to verify structural integrity.
What's normal? Couple weeks?
it's Christmas.
That's something you could ask
Yeah.
the applicant if you wanted to. I mean, we're at the holidays, I mean, there's,
Maybe a month?
Yeah.
With 1 month? 1 month.
and
Condition
that,
of
well,
one-
so what I would suggest then is make a list of the things that you are considering as potential conditions. That would be one, and then whenever the motion is made, that motion is made, I move to add the following conditions, and all of those that you might. And if it's seconded, you could vote. If not, then you might have to pull some off because there's not consensus.
Structural
1 month
integrity.
measurement. Access.
What else do we care about?
Yeah, it's just,
If you're saying structural engineer, you're saying
yeah,
safety, correct?
structural engineer sign off.
Structural integrity of the
Yeah,
building, yes?
yeah, from the certified engineer that he had, the structural engineer.
Yeah.
We need a letter.
Is there any electricity or water going to the building?
That's a great question. Is there electricity or water going to the building?
Well, now,
Is
now, now, water going to the building, you've mentioned a tiny house, and this is another subject, but I want to get this clarified with you now. You
We'll have it
cannot,
come up then, if that's.
yeah, you cannot you cannot make this a tiny house, Brett, in the way it's made now.
Okay.
And if you ever intended to modify it to make it a tiny house, you have to come through the zoning office, and you have to come before the planning commission for approval as an accessory dwelling unit, is what it's called,
Okay.
okay? So, we're clear, we're not,
It can be a greenhouse though, right? Not necessarily
Is anybody gonna be living there?
just plants.
just plants, okay.
I don't know how you classify those.
So there's no water or electricity in
Yeah,
there
that was the
now?
question, is no,
No water. We want to keep it that way.
What's that?
We're going to, I'm asking.
Well, if I go to get solar, I'm gonna have to get a permit to add electric
Yeah.
line out there. I mean,
yeah.
Which is the point.
yeah.
I mean,
Which-
what you will end up with is, if all of this is approved, as a structure that is safe, sound, that has 2 variances, no water, no electricity, no habitation within that building, or that structure.
Right.
Okay. And then you can, once I have a letter that says it's structurally sound, you come in for your permit for the panels, do your solar interconnect. Johnny looks at it, we approve it, then you take it to Greene County.
Sounds great.
And we're giving a time frame of a month on this, correct?
I think it should be going, well, how fast can you get an engineer? When can the city measure the building?
Well, I already have the engineer's letter. I just have to add the boards that he wanted to see
Oh, okay.
added.
Well,
And I
then-
haven't done that because I was afraid that I was gonna be made to take it down.
And then I'll need a new letter from him.
It needs to be dated after the.
Improvements been made.
Yeah.
You get it? Yeah, so like, I know he told you to do it, so now you have to do it. Then he has to come back up and see that you did it. I mean, that's what we're talking about with business, you know, with the procedures that if I go through the health department or the planning department, they come through and then they're gonna say, great, you told me, here's your plans.
The
Great.
inspection has to occur
Now I have
after
to see that
today's
you did
date.
these, that you followed through with these, and we have to inspect that. So that's why you need the second letter from your engineer saying, yes, it's approved, yes, it did, it's done. He's in compliance.
So
But you
between-
indicated he's a regular structural engineer is doing this for all of your projects, so that shouldn't be a big deal to have him come and do
Well,
that
it's
one.
another, $400, it's a big deal. He's already done the
That's
design.
not a
He's already
concern,
done
that's
the
not
drawing.
our
He's
concern.
gotta verify that you did
Yes.
the work. That's
Okay.
all we're saying.
Yeah,
Okay, so he just needs to verify the work. He doesn't need to do it, yeah, okay.
Well, he needs to come out, then he needs to write a letter saying, yes,
It's safe.
No problem.
it's safe now. He did what I told him to do, and it's
Okay.
safe.
And back to the other question, when can a reasonable time frame when the city can go out and measure the property? Because the holidays is,
he gives us access. I mean, that's part of our condition too, is he gives access, that's part of our conditions, you give access, and then we can send somebody out, or staff can send somebody out.
yeah, I'm just trying to figure out the the
I don't think-
timeframe.
I don't think that's gonna be anything of a couple days.
Well, I think we need to put
Fine.
that
Come
in
out
the
whenever you
conditions.
want, come out, yeah.
So you're giving me permission to come out whenever I want,
Sure.
whether you're there or not?
Just-
Well,
Okay.
can I maybe suggest that, and I'm just throwing dates out, so if you say something to the effect that inspections must occur between December 12th and January 15th, that lets Mr. Henderson know that Denise won't be coming on his property at any point in the next year. He's giving a specific time frame, and that we're understanding there's a specific time frame in which we expect the certified engineer's letter back as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, dates make sense. Can you get that accomplished by January 15th?
Yes.
I move that one of the conditions be, to quote you, from 12 December to 15 January, to have this completed, the work and the measurement.
And the letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't referenced the work in the conditions only because Denise is simply going to check whether it's in compliance when she does go to check, so is that
And he's
correct?
given
So
permission for me to go during my schedule, yeah.
do we need to move it forward then, because he'll need to bring it into compliance? Do we need to move your, access to
I'm
the
only looking
property?
at what they've approved, so I'm only going out there and looking at what is existing that he's saying is existing.
okay,
Okay,
That
so,
that would be existing in compliance.
with the variance, correct.
Right.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so as long as he has the structural permit letter by that January 15th deadline, and that gives him time to do the improvements that he needs to make to get the structural engineer letter,
Okay,
he can then apply for the permit.
But you can, but you'll have your part done by 15 January too. You'll have the house, you'll have it measured by 15 January. It has nothing to do with his letter. It's two separate issues.
I'm so sorry, what,
You'll have the measurements done by 15 January.
yeah.
Okay.
And my measurements can be done.
Yeah, okay, that,
These
I
are not
agree.
relative to the structural engineering. I think we're giving him till January 15th for him to get the 5 boards or whatever he
And we're
says
giving-
needs to be
and-
done, and the structural engineering report
And we're giving
done.
you till January 15th the structure measured.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, yeah,
okay,
you
you
can.
just said that's not a
yeah.
problem, okay.
Yeah, and then, he will submit a permit then for the accessory,
Okay.
structure panels.
Um,
And it would probably be a good idea that he actually just renews his existing permit, because he actually built this under an illegal permit. We're granting a variance under an illegal permit.
So like I said, put a
So-
conditional use on that, you need to get a building, you're doing modifications here, we need a permit.
Yeah, because
An updated
Green
permit.
County's gonna go, wait,
All right,
this is
so
a
we-
2013
Little
permit.
sketchy.
So then, again, we're
Yeah.
going back at this, so we need a permit, because there's no permit there is 0 permit at this point in time. There's no permit to do any kind of work. And he's done a modification, which says he should have had a permit, but he's out of compliance with not having a building permit to do anything.
So the
At this
motion
point.
would be, the
Add it.
condition would be
Permit
to
too.
Yeah.
require
Yeah.
appropriate permits.
Yes.
from the village,
From the
correct?
village.
Not from the
Village.
building
From
permit.
the
Obtain,
village.
obtain appropriate permit from the village.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So parliamentary question too on that. So let's say these conditions aren't met, or something isn't met by that date, what transpires then?
The staff, through the zoning administrator, has the power to take action to enforce the violation, because there's violations.
Okay. You clear with that? That's what I wanted for your edification. It goes, so all these conditions the conditions that we're putting on, that you're going to meet by the 15th, if they're not met, then all of a sudden you're gonna go roll back into citations, that you're in violation, that you haven't upheld your part of what the conditions were for the variance.
Yeah.
Clear? I mean, I'm just trying to make it clear that it's on the record that we're all on the same page, that we're saying we're gonna get it done, you're committing that's gonna get done, it will get done by the 15th.
I'm gonna get it done, yes. Thank you.
When you're done with the votes, I want to make a comment for the record to Mr. Henderson.
Okay. Any other conditions?
So how many do we have, and what's the motion gonna be?
So, yeah,
Okay.
permit,
You got permit, you got January 15th.
access to property,
Do you want me to read them back to
structural
you?
engineer sign off.
Yeah, you're gonna type up the, yeah,
Judy's got them written down.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're asking for access, one of the conditions is permission to access the property for the purpose of determining height and setback. And then I've added access to occur between December 12th and January 15th. Require the structural integrity of the structure from a certified structural engineer. I added that part, but I'm assuming that's what you want.
Yeah,
That there be no water, no electric, and no habitation. But my question about that is when he goes to get a permit, I'm assuming that will be covered because the permit would be for a shed or whatever purpose fits this. Do you,
Structural engineer needs to send us a letter. He has to do that. He's gonna do the work. Structural engineer has to inspect it, come back with a letter stating that the work was done and the structure is,
to the Village of
Suitable.
Yellow Springs?
Yes.
Okay, so, yeah.
And the purpose of the
Code
structure is the
compliant
shed,
would
is
be
that
the
what you're
proper
asking?
word, Ryan, would be code compliant, or it's not subject to code inspection? It's just the structural integrity that you want.
Yeah, because once he gets the solar panel information to us.
No.
Yeah, but that's different. I'm
That-
Not
talking
on
about-
that yet.
I'm just saying for
Because
electric,
but
we don't do that.
there's two
Yeah.
sets of structural engineer requirements. We've got the existing one, the building that is up
Yes.
now is structurally sound.
Right.
Solar panel issue is a different one that the structural engineer will have to come back and verify that with the panels on, that it's structurally
No,
sound.
no, the structural engineer indicated in his letter that the modifications would meet the solar
Okay.
requirements. And so I feel that when he comes for the accessory structure permit, which he has to take to Greene County, they're gonna do another inspection and they will look at that structure. So if they see any problems, then they're gonna not approve it until he's modified it.
So between requiring proper permitting from the Village of Yellow Springs for an accessory structure and requiring a letter from a certified structural engineer attesting to code compliance, you've got that covered?
Then he can come back for the permit for the solar panels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you need the piece of no water, no electric, no habitation?
Well, no habitat, I mean, it's not gonna, it's not a habitation thing. He can have the electric once he gets the permit from Greene
Right, so I'm saying,
County.
is that just, do you want to strike that?
Yeah,
Okay. The inspections must occur between December 12th and January 15th. Must be completed by January 15th? What do you prefer? Must be completed by?
Complete by,
Completed by.
Must be. Okay. And then you had added any further use would require proper permitting and,
right, so,
Process.
so like for he put the habitation into his variance, and that's why I felt it needed to be addressed. Just from the perspective that, just to let him know that he cannot do it for that purpose.
Talking about like
Okay.
tiny houses or what?
Right, it's not, it doesn't
But
meet
Home
the-
Inc. doesn't allow tiny houses
It
either.
doesn't meet the qualifications, yeah.
so do you, it seems almost a giveaway, but because any further use, of course, requires proper permitting and
Right.
process, but you can add it to a condition as simply a statement of the obvious if you wish. No? Okay. So you would be moving to approve the variance request for 1 foot,
height,
1 foot in height,
3 feet,
a variance of 2 feet from the side setback with the attached
It was 3 feet.
conditions.
No, you're getting 3 feet, you're just getting 2 feet over. You're moving 2 feet over. Giving you 3 feet. It's giving you
It's
3
a
feet.
variance of 2 feet, right?
That
From the
doesn't make
fence
sense.
line.
He's moving it over 3 feet?
It's
It's a
a
variance
3-foot
of,
variance.
It's a 3-foot.
okay,
3-foot
3-foot variance.
You're right, 3-foot variance from the fence, from the property line.
No. It's 2 feet from the property
2
line.
feet from
saying.
the property
Property
line,
line,
for a
yeah.
3-foot
It-
variance.
yeah.
We're giving
Yeah.
the 3 feet to the building.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, give it, yeah.
Setback is 5, you're subtracting 3 from it.
No,
I'm,
we're adding 3, taking 2 from it.
We're taking 2 from
We're
it.
we're letting them have 3 feet on the building. The
so,
2 foot from the
just
property
in your
line.
motion, make clear which it is, and then we're with the attached conditions.
No, he's getting the 3 feet, but the way it's worded,
The setback will be 2
right,
when he's done.
from the property line, that's all it is. So if we do it the other way, he'd only be getting 2 feet.
So motion?
I'll make the motion that,
You gotta say all that too, don't you?
we're making a motion for it. The whole thing or the, just for the conditions?
This is the whole shebang, correct? This is it?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
well, let's do,
I'll make a motion that we approve the variance of 1 foot in height, 3 feet in side, which means 2 feet from the property line. With the conditions, it's, the letter comes from the certified engineer by 15 January. Mr. Anderson, he applies for a new permit by 15 January. And the city, excuse me, the village measures the height of the building by 15 January.
has, no, well, they have, with the.
Access.
with the
Yeah, access.
Our property
applicant
acts,
grants access to the property for purposes of verifying compliance with the variances.
that's what I said.
I don't even know what you
Is there a
said.
second?
See, second.
I second that.
Okay,
I'll
does
do-
everyone feel comfortable and ready for a roll call on the motion? Are we clear? Do you need the conditions read back?
Yeah.
I think we're clear.
We're good.
Clear? All right. Salmonson,
Yes.
Osterholm,
Yes.
Pallotta.
No,
All right,
All right, so that hearing's complete. I'd like, Mr. Henderson, I'd like to say something to you. You and I have never met. I'm the village solicitor for Yellow Springs. I cannot tell you how much time and energy has been spent on the situation involving your home that was both extensive, much of it was unnecessary. The village is not here to try and prevent you from trying to do what you want to do. All that they ask is, and all that they require, is what they require of every other villager in this community, which is just to follow the zoning code. The Planning Commission, the BZA, all very reasonable, open people. I think you've watched this process tonight for over 2 hours if they tried to come up with a solution that was fair and reasonable. All that you have to do is come down, you talk to the staff and say, this is what I'd like to do. They will work with anybody that comes through those doors that wants to work with them. Because if you do it on the front end, it's a heck of a lot easier than what we had to do tonight. It's not, and because if a person does something and then asks forgiveness later and they're not forgiven, then the next step is that the village would have to go to court and get an order for somebody to have to remove something. Hugely inefficient, very, very, very disruptive to people's lives, not to mention expensive to the village. And again, it's just unnecessary. Your requests were pretty reasonable. They were not unreasonable requests, but you didn't do it the right way, and this turned into something that it didn't need to be. So what I'm simply asking on behalf of the village staff, and thanking the time of the BZA to go through this process, that please follow the way it's supposed to be done. I can't force you to apologize to anybody, but I would strongly encourage you to consider apologizing to some of the members of staff because of the manner in which they've been treated. But that's all I'll say. Thank you for your time.
I think the only thing else I want to add to it is just what Chris said, was that, and we talked about as we went through all this, just follow the process. The process is easy. The process is obvious. If we follow the process, it's going to make it easier. It just makes it easier for you, for these guys. It's just, the process is there for a reason, for all of us to follow. And whether it's your business, I don't care, my business, his business, it doesn't matter. We all follow the process, otherwise it just causes havoc and chaos, and we don't want that. There's no reason for it. There's no reason for it. That's why all that I wanted to drill into you, when I kept on talking about it, is just the process is there for a reason. Be upfront, and you're gonna get an answer, or you're gonna get guidance. I mean, that's all we're gonna get. I mean, you're gonna get an answer, you're gonna get guidance. And that's what you want, so you can do what you need to do. And to be profitable in your business that you're running from your home.
Yeah,
I
please go
just
get
say,
a permit
Goodwill-
now.
Goodwill for you, Mr. Anderson, every time your art side screams, I wanna make a change, have the one that's gonna have to actually do the work, have that scream back at you, that means more paperwork. Because that's the way construction is, anytime you make a change on plans, you usually have to draw up a whole new plan to get those approved. So, I mean, it's kind of a redundant thing, but it's there, and it's there for safety.
And the only thing I'd add, it's easier if you have a plan and get it approved as the, once and build to the plan, as opposed to building something and then asking forgiveness. You have to, dealing with the government, you have to have a plan, then they'll either approve or disapprove it, then you have to follow through the plan. Just changing everything and trying to talk us, that hurts you more than helps you, and costs the people to my left many hours of work.
I think when you go through Greene County, once you go for putting the solar panels on, you're gonna see when Greene County comes in, what they expect. And it's not, I've gone through the process, it's not a fun process. It's not a fun process. They're hard to work with. So if you're not clear with them, they're just not gonna bother, and it's just not gonna be easy. Trust me, it's not gonna be easy, and they won't and they don't care. Whereas we care, we're here having time with you, they don't care, they're just moving right on. So keep that in mind going forward.
And can I say something as a staff person? I feel that there has been an exorbitant waste of staff time on this over the past 3 years. And I'm one person in a planning and zoning office that's responsible for permits for the entire community, economic development. I wear multiple hats. We've had a huge increase in permits. The first year in 15, we had 80. We are at 176 we're not even at the end of this year. We're seeing a lot of development. We're seeing a lot of economic stimulation. This has taken an incredible amount of staff time, not only for me, for the village manager, for PD. It's unnecessary. And I have an open door policy. You can talk to other contractors in town. I work with people, but you have to meet me halfway.
Thank you. And I do apologize. I will try to do better. I will do better. And thank you for your
Just
time.
call me up. We can have an appointment.
Sounds
Talk
good.
about it.
All right, now.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Second,
All in favor? Hey.
hey,
Happy holidays,
Got a little rush there, didn't you? Yeah, second that.
those questions are screwy.
Uh,
I think it must be that's something policy. At first I thought that's.
Hey, Richard, how are you?
I'm the same old person.
Yeah, what's up?
Thank you.